Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of coerced or voluntary repatriation of third world peasant migrants from the West back to their countries of origin. Now, there's been quite a bit of sort of talk about this in the case of, say, if parties that are not fully on board with the globalization project, political parties may come to power in various places, whether that's Holland, the Netherlands, or in the United States, or anywhere else, or where they may form part of a government and be very influential in determining migration policy. Now, remember the migration policy we currently have, which is mass movement of third world peasants into the West. This is done without the consent. There is no consent from the people for this. In a supposedly representative democracy, the people have not been asked, and they do not give their consent. So straight away, the mass movement is illegitimate, and it's been orchestrated by the World Economic Forum and the globalist deep state cabal. So there's nothing natural or organic about the mass movement of people from the surplus populations, the third world surplus populations of the world into the West. So we need to get that established. There is nothing legitimate or organic or natural about it. Nothing at all. I'll come back to that in a minute, but there's a lot of concern, of course, by the globalist propaganda machine that their plans will be disrupted or slowed or some way interfered with. And if there's anything of the globalists we've learned, they will not tolerate interference with their plans. They'll call you a Nazi, put you in prison, call you an insurrectionist. They'll do a whole lot of things, but they will not tolerate interference with their agenda. So nothing democratic, nothing quite democratic about that. They claim to be the ones fighting to protect democracy. What a fucking joke. Anyway, coming to this, the propaganda then has been that, there's no point in considering remigration or repatriation or anything like that, because these people are so desperate that the migrants from the third world are supposedly, so the propaganda says, they're supposedly so desperate they will tolerate anything. They'll tolerate 1,000 deaths. They'll tolerate all their children being cut to pieces. They'll tolerate anything and everything, being slaves, being prostitutes in the first world. They'll do anything to get to the first world country and stay, and nothing you can do will send them back again. And the only ones that may be enticed to go back from the first world to the third world are the ones who've got the best qualifications and are the most highest capacity to integrate. They're the only ones that will go back. So you would lose the best ones and be left with the... Anyway, let's just explore this, because it's a load of fucking nonsense. Now, in order to buttress the argument, there's one article I saw, it might have been a video, was the argument was that people going from Africa to, say, parts of the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia and other places, to work as labourers, and we're talking 6 or 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, working in very hot and difficult, dusty conditions, and being paid slave wages. Those people, to get those jobs and to get those situations, they'll arrive illegally, they'll stay illegally, and engage in all sorts of illegality. Even though at border crossings, if they try and charge the border crossing border guards in these countries, the Middle East will fire upon them, and there's allegations that many of them being shot and killed, but they'll put up with all this. Then they'll put up with the most outrageous inhumane treatment once in because Saudi Arabia, for example, is quite a rich country. Their oil revenues. So this is an indication that these people are so desperate that they'll do and say anything. So we shouldn't be harsh on them because they tell so many lies to immigration officers. They falsely say that they're seeking asylum or falsely claim they're escaping danger, because they're just so desperate. So they're allowed to tell any lie they want. And it's therefore incumbent on these white people to believe all these lies. And if you don't believe the lies you're told, then you're a fucking Nazi. So here's the overall sort of architecture of the argument that these people aren't the third world peasants. They're not coming to the West as freeloaders, or haven't been hustled into it by NGOs and all sorts of activists. They haven't been given United Nations NGO free pass, all the transport, all the food, the clothing, the way stations. This hasn't been orchestrated. Or they're just people that one day in their little mud hut in the middle of fucking nowhere, this illiterate peasant just suddenly gets up. You know what? I'm going to travel 5,000 kilometers to go to a rich white country so I can have a better life. And we're talking a penniless illiterate peasant, by the way, illiterate in their own language, let alone anything else. And I'm going to make a journey. So look, I'll set off today in my bare feet and with my rag clothing and without any food. And I'm just going to head on. No, that doesn't happen. So this idea that there's something organic or natural about the mass movement of people is beyond absurd. These are people who have never traveled more than 5 miles from their own village. They've never been away from a situation. They haven't been surrounded by their relatives and family members and village elders and so on. So they're not deciding to make this journey. They're being hustled into it, coaxed into it, talked into it. Professional agitators go around to all these villages, and then all the infrastructure to transport them, all the 5,000, 10,000 kilometer journey, all that infrastructure is provided by the NGOs that are funded largely by the Western countries. Germany, for example, funds many of the NGO boats in the Mediterranean Sea that transport illegals from Africa into Europe. So and the same, getting people from Bangladesh or Pakistan into Western Europe or elsewhere. All that infrastructure is provided, and the infrastructure is huge, by the way. It can be a 20-day plus journey or longer, and so they're given clothing, food, water, shelter, buses, transport, the whole thing. Is provided later. But they could never even dream of undertaking a journey like that without a massive infrastructure to facilitate this mass movement of people. So coming to the issue of repatriation or remigration, as it's sometimes called, these people are not natural migrants. There is nothing organic about what they're doing. A migrant is saying, look, I've got skills to sell, and I think that I can go to America or here or there and more successfully sell my skills or have better appreciated skills or whatever the case may be. So I can go there and can take my family and I can have a better life through my productive capacities, which are as a result of my experience, my education, and so on, and so forth. So that's what a migrant. Now you do get, let's just say, in the case of in the 1800s in the United States, the Russian government in the 1880s and so on, they had a bit of a pogrom on the Jews, and so quite a lot of Jews then migrated to the United States, to New York, and a lot of these people would say they were prominent in the textile industry, for example, and other pursuits. But that was one of the major ones, and a lot of them settled around New York, or that wider New York area. They're still there today. Or you get people like, there were certain subsets of very devout Lutherans that left Sweden to come to the United States. They settled around places like Minneapolis. And there are other groups, the original pilgrims coming to Plymouth Rock and so on. They were very devout and pious people who were looking to sort of create their religious paradise. So there were, but the numbers weren't huge, and the U.S. government had a number of, you had to come to be an American citizen. Now, that wasn't 100% successful, but this idea of dual nationality and all that. No, you're coming to America be an American, and that was very much part of the experience, coming through Ellis Island and the like. People were encouraged to anglicise their names. So it's very much you're coming to a Christian, primarily Protestant, although there's freedom of religion, but you're coming to a Christian, primarily Protestant country, and you're here to fit in with us, not the other way around. So there have been movements of people. You wouldn't call it a mass movement of people, certainly not by the standards of today. There was no NGOs doing the assistance. If you didn't have the money to make the journey, you had to become like an indentured apprentice or something like that, so that the guy in America would pay for your journey out there, but in return you had to work for him for 10 years or so as an indentured work. I mean, it very close to being a servant, really. But that was if you wanted. So you either had to have the money to come, or able to borrow it, or you had to be indentured. Not today, where these people are utterly fucking penniless. They haven't got a nickel to their name, and yet they're able to undertake 10,000 kilometre journeys that if they had to pay for it, it would cost them many thousands of dollars to make that sort of journey. And then they're able to arrive, falsely claim asylum and all sorts of things. So very different situation today than it was then. But coming to the issue of repatriation, I've mentioned in previous videos that I was at a place where there were some people speaking, and there was an Indian lady got up and announced that since she was a little girl and all the people she knew since they were young, all they talked about, all they dreamed of was getting to a rich white country. And now she's in Australia, and it's wow. Oh, wow, I'm now in a rich white country. And I've come to, take everything you guys fucking have. And now, this is the woman's no genius. She's just, gifted a job in the public service or something. So she's consuming resources, but she delivers nothing, brings nothing, creates nothing, produces nothing. But all she's done is dreamed of going to a rich white country, like a childhood fairy tale dream that's now sort of come true. And everyone she knows thinks the same way in India. This is from India. So you think, fuck, and we need to understand that based on, and there are, the internet and television, there's other factors contributing to this, but it's there's now a vast network of agitators and people movement conduits to take these I don't think she's an illiterate peasant, that woman, but to take these people from the third world and bring them to the first world. And there are hundreds, there are billions of these people who want to do this. And for every one person that already lives in the West today, for every white person, there are 3 or 4 around the world, brown and black people, who want to come to the West, not because they want to contribute or produce or create or do anything. They just want a piece of the rich white boy action. That's what it is. That they haven't come to produce or create anything. And this was a different. Some in the 1880s to America or earlier, they were maybe they wanted some sort of greater religious freedom or things like that. But they came with skills and a desire to do better and to produce and create something. Not like today, where these people are arriving en masse, gazillions of them into the West for nothing other than to parasite off the welfare system. They don't want to produce fucking anything. So let's have a look at remigration or repatriation. My view is that it will work. And can work if the policies are put in place. Now, if people have arrived in the West and they're integrating and fitting in and doing productive stuff, they've got a job, or maybe they started a business, restaurant or something, and they're paying their taxes and everything. Well, why would you want them to leave? They are contributing and producing something. They're the people you want to stay. But there's not many of those. If there's even 10% of the total, I'd be surprised. I think it's more likely to be 5% or something like that. But anyway, why are people here? If you look at the amount of money that's sent back from Australia or any country where they go, whether it's Indians or Bangladeshis or Eritreans, it doesn't matter. If they can make any sort of money, they'll try and send it back to their relatives in in these third world countries, $50 in some places and you can live like a king. So if you can get just one of your relatives to go to the West and work as a labourer, or it doesn't matter, work as a drug courier or something, it doesn't mean anything, any underground activity, any illegal activity, then a slave wage or something like that, and they send money back to, that's the sole purpose. So there are whole places where they want to send one of their number into the West to try and make some money, but by any means, anyhow, any amount, and then send that money or some of it back. So if that's heavily taxed, for example, those repatriations of money, then the incentive to stay in the West would be, because they're away from their relatives, their family, their friends. They're suffering in some ways in doing this, and they would prefer, I think, many of them, to go back. And if it's uneconomic for them, as in they can't send money back to the home country, then there's no point in staying. So I think that would create a lag, but you have to heavily tax or place the conditions on it. And the reason for this isn't just to make things difficult for them. They're working here, probably illegally. They're depressing wages, money under the table, the whole sort of thing. And then that money isn't being spent locally in the West on goods and services in the shops and so on. So it's not contributing to the local economy. In order to save money as well, these people are living 20-25 to a 2-bedroom apartment, which may be the same as the sort of conditions they came from. So it's not like, that's terrible. They're used to a first world middle class life. No, they were never used to that. They were used to a mud hut village in the middle of fucking nowhere. That's what they're used to. That's all they've ever known. So that they're living pretty much in the same conditions as they did in terms of being packed in tight. But now they've got lights that turn on with a switch, toilets to flush, water that you turn on the tap or the faucet and you've got water in there instead of having to walk a mile to the local well. So they've got certainly benefits in being in a first world country. But if you tax the remittances back to the home family and country, then that'll take the incentive out. Similarly, it'll mean it's uneconomic for them to really do anything, so they'll have to go back and to the home country. So that would shake out quite a lot. Being more rigorous on asylum applications and so on. If you haven't got your documents with you, too bad. Something like that. So raising the bar there. That's less likely to do. The globalists will ensure that the bar is always being lowered, not raised, when it comes to those sorts of things. But also the inability to apply for asylum when you arrive. You have to do it remotely. You can't do it when you arrive. So I want asylum. You have to go to a refugee camp or something like that to do it. The other thing is any employer that employs someone who's not doesn't have a legal work status will get heavily fined. That will shake out a lot. Raids on use of under the table, cash paid employment. Again, I'm not sure governments would do that. The optics, but there are a range of measures, and again, taxing the remittances back to the home will certainly be a big factor. Clamping down on employing anyone that doesn't have a legitimate work status equally. Other things like students, letting them work is also something that could be introduced as a disincentive for coming to a Western country. Now, there are other things that could be done, but this idea that repatriation is impossible or it's not going, because I don't believe these people are desperate. If you look at or certainly no more desperate than they ever were, they're not just suddenly desperate and they never were previously. That's nonsense. For example, if you look at the first white people that started going into the British in particular, but also the French, into the interior of Africa, sort of in the 1800s, and they were amazed at the extent of the endless tribal warfare. And remember, slavery was rampant. back in the time, even when the white countries had stopped slavery. Slavery always was and still was rampant in Africa, and it was a bit of a status symbol. Look, I got 20 slaves here, and it made you out to be sort of some heavy hitter. But the famines, and this is when this is before the population explosions that occurred as a result of Western medicine. The famines, the diseases that ravaged the place, the endless, constant, petty tribal warfare, and these things. The white people were amazed that people could live like this. Women having 15 children, all of them dying from malnutrition or disease or this or that, and so on. So they were so that it's always been that way in places like Africa and Pakistan and what today is Bangladesh. So it's no different from how it always was. So we're suddenly supposed to believe that these people weren't desperate when the circumstances were very difficult for them, but suddenly now they've decided that it's desperate. So it's not related to desperation at all. I dismissed that completely. It's related to the facilities that are provided to these people to move from these countries to the West. If those facilities and infrastructure wasn't there, they wouldn't move. They wouldn't even think of moving, let alone make the move. And if they did make the move, they'd never get anywhere near it. They'd give up after a couple of days when they realised the enormity of their task. I remember some of these people are so illiterate and simple. Places where the average IQ is 70 or 75. They're so illiterate and simple that they think a place. This is, say you're in Pakistan, a rural village. They think a place called England is just a few miles down the road. A couple of days. If I set up early in the morning, I'll be there in the afternoon, just walking along some dusty track. They've got no comprehension of distance and geography. If you show them a map, these people, they stare at it blankly. They've got no concept at all. So without agitators and stirrers going in there, without all that infrastructure being laid on, there's no way they'd undertake or contemplate undertaking these sort of journeys. So I think mass repatriation, encouraging people to look, there's no point in you staying. Removal of benefits, for example, would achieve the same sort of thing, and say, look, you can have a free ticket back to your country of origin, and here's the ticket, and that sort of thing. That would be an incentive. Look, your benefits have been cut off today. You'll receive not a penny. You're not a citizen, you can't work, here's your free ticket back. And that would have a huge effect on things. So, but if someone is working productively and, again, they've integrated and assimilated and speak the language, then they should stay. But I doubt if that would even come to 10% of the total. And the rest would end up self-repatriating if the circumstances and the conditions were made right for that, and that's a very reasonable thing, in my view, a reasonable thing to do. But this idea that they're so desperate that they'll stay no matter what, or then I don't believe that for a minute, and that's the propaganda that's been doing the rounds. You've been Tassos today, your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.